Directed by brothers Danny and Michael Philippou, Bring Her Back is a movie about someone going away and another person really wanting them to come back. Danny and Michael, who you might recognise as Australia's sanest citizens thanks to their YouTube channel Raka Raka. Raka Raka being the infamous brains and the original creators behind the Ronald McDonald mascot. 2 years previously, the pair had burst onto the scene with about as much elegance as a politician bursting all over his laptop screen after learning about all of the impoverished children in his area. Talk to Me, a movie about someone with severe social anxiety who really just wants someone to talk to, was their first major production, which has helped plant their roots as modern-day masters of horrors, which is really only emphasised with the release of Bring Her Back. Because Bring Her Back features one of the most terrifying creatures of all: Australians. Like any traditional Australian household, the movie begins with a Russian woman being hanged by someone in his undies, while someone films it for their own sick and twisted Australian pleasure. After the formalities are then out of the way, we're introduced to two of the main characters: a partially sighted girl named Piper, who can see, but partially, and her fully sighted stepbrother Andy. The setup for the events of the movie is that they walk into the bathroom to see their dad lying dead on the floor. Well, the only thing Piper saw is nothing. And what stands out about Sora Wong's performance as Piper is that she isn't a classically trained actor with prior acting experience, yet she sells her role immediately upon meeting her. Bring Her Back is her first acting gig, which she does a phenomenal job in. It's just a shame that she permanently blinded herself to better help relate to the character. Because of their father's rather untimely aquatic nap, they're sent off to live with their new foster mother, a completely normal and very sane woman named Laura. Well, about as sane as an Aussie can be, I guess. And from the get-go, it's obvious that Andy deeply cares about his sister Piper and does his very best to try and shield her from the horrors of the world as he sees her as exposed and vulnerable, but Piper doesn't see the world that way. She doesn't see it at all. She's independent, headstrong, and very much capable of doing most things by herself. At first, moving in with Laura seems like a convenient fitting for Piper, as they learn that Laura also had a blind daughter named Kathy, who unfortunately passed away due to not being lucky enough to see and also swim. Laura is obviously still hurt by the fact that her daughter has passed away, but she's seemingly still trying to do her best to foster kids in need, with that not only being Andy and Piper, but a little boy named Oliver, who we're introduced to as he stands in the drained backyard pool where Kathy drowned, tightly holding onto a pet cat, completely unfazed, as it desperately scratches and claws at him to escape. He stands there, blankly staring ahead with that deep ADHD stare as people try to talk to him, as if there's nothing behind his eyes at all but a void of emptiness. That's just a side effect of being Australian. And the unfortunate effect of usually having child actors in your movie is that you have child actors in your movie, and they're terrible. But something about Jonah Wren-Phillips, who plays Oliver, is that he's actually quite the opposite of terrible, which honestly can also be said for the entire cast's performance too. Channeling his inner Australian energy, Ollie's performance is deeply unsettling, and even moving later on. Ollie doesn't talk, but often spends his time at Laura's side, or being locked away in his bedroom, as children are to be seen but not heard. Laura seems incredibly welcoming of Piper, almost as if she's incredibly happy to be around her, but when it comes to Andy, it's as if she's coming across standoffish of him, as she's slightly dismissive of him in a subtle yet undermining way. It's almost as if Piper is the child that she wanted to foster, but unfortunately for her, they come together as a package bundle, like a 2-for-1 offer on some orphaned kids. That night, as Piper and Andy spent their first evening at their new foster home, we see that Laura was actually the one watching the videotaped incident at the beginning of the movie involving salt circles and people in their underpants. A strange, yet hidden hobby that she's too ashamed to let anyone know about due to people not liking middle-aged Russian men standing around in their dirty underpants. And if things couldn't get any worse for Andy, not only has he lost his father, but he also appears to have wet himself in the night, something which forces him to directly confront the shower. But while looking at it, contemplating if it's worth just smelling like dried urine or not, he starts to have flashbacks of discovering his dad laying dead on the bathroom floor, as Piper desperately attempts to perform mouth-to-mouth on their dead father, as she desperately attempts to suck out any nutrients left in his mouth full of sick. Going to the funeral and smelling slightly of piss, Laura takes the opportunity to sneakily cut a lock of their dead father's hair to add to her collection of dead men's bodily belongings, before she attempts to force a deeply upset Andy to give his dead father a kiss on the lips by saying that it's their custom. Over this short course of time, Laura has gone from someone who on the surface seems to be loving and caring, to someone who seems to just be genuinely trying to underhandedly upset Andy as much as she possibly can, because there's nothing more entertaining than bullying a kid whose parents just died. After taking the teenagers home from the funeral, she proceeds to get them drunk in order to retrieve information from Andy under the guise of giving them a good time. And after Piper is well and truly out for the count, Andy and Laura appear to be having a genuine heart-to-heart with each other, where he confides in her that without Piper ever knowing, their father used to viciously beat him while never laying a finger on Piper. So not only has Andy been doing his absolute best to keep Piper safe from the horrors of the world, but he's also been attempting to keep her safe from the horrors of their father, as he's worried that it would crush her if she knew the truth about the man she deeply loved. After passing out from a night of drinking, we see that it isn't actually Andy wetting the bed, it's Laura wetting Andy's bed. Every night she urinates into a jug and tips it all over him as he sleeps, in order to make it appear that he's wet the bed. This isn't just some strange thing that Australian people do to each other, but it's Laura forcing Andy to confront the shower, something which she knows brings back terrible memories of him discovering his dead father there, forcing him to think about his conflicted feelings towards the man who raised him and his sister, but someone who also violently assaulted him. While bathing Ollie and cleaning up the blood on his hands, as he's always going around doing a little bit of murdering, Laura sees in the reflection not Ollie, but the devil instead. A slight nod to the fact that Australian children are actually hellspawn. After Ollie is done taking his nice, refreshing blood bath, he notices Andy outside, using the outdoor tap to clean himself, instead of using the nice, warm and refreshing shower. Laura goes out with Piper, and it's just Andy and Ollie in the house together, where Andy realizes that Ollie has been locked in his room this entire time. After letting him out and spending some time with him, in an attempt to bond with the boy with the fetal alcohol syndrome stare, he offers him a piece of fruit on the end of a sharp kitchen knife. A sharp kitchen knife that Ollie proceeds to start biting and gnawing down on, cutting the inside of his mouth into pieces. Andy, in an attempt to stop Ollie from further injuring himself, pulls the knife out of his mouth and slices Ollie's lip open, as Andy's decided that Ollie will look much better off with 3 lips instead of 2. Strangely, Ollie would much rather stay at home and chew on the knife like an Australian Twizzler, and doesn't exactly seem too pleased as Andy tries to stop him from doing that to take him to the hospital. There's a salt boundary around the house, and Ollie refuses to cross it due to being part slug. But after Andy forces him over, Ollie falls to the ground and begins violently convulsing and screaming at the top of his lungs in agony, where he then speaks his first line in the entire movie. Help me. All it took was a self-inflicted cleft palate. Laura arrives home just in time to see her pet slug in pain, before taking him back inside to watch their favourite Russian movie, showing people being taken out of the salt circle. While watching it, Ollie begins to talk and ask Laura where is he and who is she. Obviously she's been doing something to him related to these videotapes that she's been watching, and now Andy has come along and ruined it because he never thinks about anyone except himself. After watching what they do in the footage after someone leaves the salt circle, Laura is able to regain control of Ollie before feeding him a lock of Andy and Piper's father's hair, just in case he still has the knife munchies. And after days of showering outside and not showering at all, Andy eventually decides that it's time to take a shower. With his clothes on. That's not quite right, but one step at a time, I suppose. But while killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as he washes himself and washes his clothes, his dead, not-so-dead father makes an appearance, telling him she'll die in the rain, something which causes him to slip and bash his head on the floor due to seeing this strange man in the bathroom before seeing Ollie for a split second. Andy eventually regains consciousness in the hospital, but as soon as he realizes that it's raining, he desperately tries to leave, but Australian doctors like to keep people against their will. Laura comes to visit Andy in the hospital, and thinking that she's someone who cares about him and his sister, he tells her what he saw in the shower, with her responding with, "You don't think it's because your dad died in the shower when I killed him," before then immediately pretending as if she didn't just say that, to severely confuse the concussed boy, as she's a gaslighting girl boss. My favourite genre of women. Crazy ones. Andy is out of the hospital and back at home with his mentally stable fake Australian mum, who proceeds to constantly gaslight and lie to Andy because honestly it's pretty fun to mess with someone suffering with a head injury. And speaking of messing with people, Laura and Ollie continue to watch their favourite Russian home movie, consisting of a woman being hanged while another person becomes demonically possessed and engages in the Russian pastime of devouring a human corpse. In the video, the possessed woman is taking the soul from the body she is consuming and transferring it to the body of the recently hung woman. She's going to attempt to use this method to bring Kathy back from the dead. Kathy, whose body she's been keeping in a freezer this entire time. I get wanting to bring your deceased daughter back to life, but why choose another blind person when you could have chosen someone whose eyes turn on properly? In order for her plan to be a success, she's going to need to kill Piper, something which she's going to have an awful lot of difficulty doing with Andy still around. So thinking like any sane and logical person would, Laura comes up with the conclusion of putting Andy's deodorant on and punching Piper in the face as hard as she can while she takes a nap. Understandably, Piper isn't exactly too fond of this sibling roughhousing, and Laura has successfully managed to turn Piper against him, as she tells Piper that Andy did this because their dad used to hit him. Laura then attacks Andy in order to provoke him even more, resulting in him letting out his inner Kyle as he puts his fist through a wall before leaving the house and going to see their social worker. But while there, he sees a missing persons poster for a boy named Connor Bird, who doesn't look very much like a bird, but very much like the boy Laura is claiming to be Oliver. Andy eventually manages to convince his social worker Wendy to come back to the house with him, which she reluctantly does, as she states that Laura has been a well-respected counsellor with them for over 20 years, which actually is quite a long amount of time, because I just found out Australian years actually work the same as the rest of the world. Laura discovers Ollie destroying the house with an insatiable appetite as he's going through a growth spurt. With his enlarged head and protruding ribcage, he proceeds to attack her in order to eat her, where he manages to bite an artery. Laura manages to lock herself away, but undeterred, Oliver then proceeds to start eating the wooden countertop, tearing out his teeth with each bite of the hardened wood, before turning his attention to his own arm. Laura takes a peckish Oliver outside for a frozen ready meal as he begins to feast on her daughter, when suddenly Andy and Wendy arrive. Wendy discovers the frozen body and quickly attempts to leave, before her and Andy are then both run over by Laura and crushed against a car. Wendy dies on impact, and Andy just about manages to survive it, but with him not being in any position to get up and move out of the way, considering that the position he is in is smashed to pieces, Laura finishes him off by drowning him in a shallow puddle. Piper has been away this entire time, as she's been playing dodgeball but with blind people, as they randomly throw balls around the room at the walls or something. And when she returns home, she can hear Andy calling out to her, follows the voice to discover Ollie standing there with a severely bloated stomach because he's got IBS. Piper immediately knows that something is wrong, as Andy is somehow much shorter and now fatter than he usually is, so locks herself in the bathroom, where she then discovers Andy's hidden dead body. Piper tries to run away, but because she's blind, the only thing she does run into is a metal pole, and Laura attempts to drown Piper in the pool because she needs to die in the same way as Kathy. The pair frantically fight for power as Piper desperately tries to pull herself from the water, and as Laura is trying to kill Piper so Ollie can transfer over Kathy's soul into her body, suddenly Laura has a change of heart. 2 dead bodies and 1 kidnapped child later, mind you. Piper then manages to get away, and Ollie willingly walks out of the boundary of the house and drops to the floor, where he begins screaming out in extreme agony. Laura, realizing that this is the end for her and her plan, drags Kathy's body from the freezer to the pool where it can thaw out, before ripping open her wound and bleeding to death. Piper manages to escape, as not only is she blind, but she's also extremely traumatized too. Ollie, with the demon inside of him now dead, wakes back up as the kidnapped little boy named Connor, as he's found alive by the police as the movie comes to an end. The Philippou brothers had been making short films for YouTube for over a decade, and had been making them in general for at least another 10 years prior to that. So to see 20 odd years worth of passion and work come to a head with a smash out success just proves that their luck with their previous movie Talk to Me wasn't actually luck at all. These guys know how to make a genuinely good horror movie, and clearly have a bucket load of passion for doing so, which in my opinion has helped cementing them to be part of the next generation of greats. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a big shout out and a massive thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to go out of their way to help support the channel. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great support, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to all uncensored versions of videos. Starting out with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Anna Nana, Zintel Magwaba, Fiery, Emoli Dunzo, Folks, Sting, Mike Severance, Michael Weston, Luark312, Luke V, Zane Monroe, Eric Ravenstein, Eugene Aveals, Di Shipton, Robert Sibley, Ben Lauer, Christopher Wright, Dandon, Mr. Monarchy, Jekyll, K8130, Mika Akim, Ang Mori, Trigger Lavetta, Kristen Eriksdotter, Pacey02, Dark Gamer HD, Celogram, Zachary Peters, Aladdin2402, Adolf Rizzler, Ian English, Jolly Good Day, Blue Templex, and Dakota Dykes. Now moving over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Edward Williams, Kiefer Payne, Charlotte Brooks, Julian McGee, Dick Duckbro, Hakon H, Seth Taylor, Bradley, Dadbod Dan, Joshua Dinkins, Brian Butler, Quincy Transu, Sam, Mike, Zeke Garza, Jack Heydrich, Brad Haney, Christian Voidani, Lars Pants on Fire, Max Van Steenis, Chummy, Noah Curtis, K8130, Connor Keller, Remon, Jonathan Lower, Samantha Samantha Lur, Blobby McFish, Miguel Clementine, Amelia, and Gert. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.